I have to make sure. Zachariah, shake your head to make sure we're good. Okay. So we're talking about the Kaddish. We just almost finished Kaddish. And the Mitzvah Hashem tonight, we're going to get to Kaddish, Urchatz, Karpas. We'll see how far we get. So with regards to drinking wine, we've talked a little bit about Kaddish, but let's just go over a little bit the sugya to talk about this, why we specifically drink wine, and what should be our kavanah, our intention when we're drinking the wine. For some reason, I lost everybody. I can't say anyone now. Oh. So the Gemara says, the Gemara in Rav Pinson talks about the ideas of drinking wine, and the Gemara in Wisdom says that shasam v'vasachas, if you drink all the 4 cups of wine at once, you're yotze the idea of yayin, wine, but you're not yotze the idea of the 4 cups. Shasam chai, what happens if you drink it, the wine is not mozug yet, it's not mixed, it's like harsh wine, straight squeezed wine. So you aren't yotze the mitzvah of cheres, which means that the idea of drinking wine specifically on the Leila Seder, so it's not stam an idea that we're drinking wine because on every Shabbos and every Yom Tov that that there's an idea to have to drink specifically on wine, because wine is connected to shir ala yayin and yayin mesamech levavenish. It brings joy, so there's one idea of wine, but there's something more specifically about yayin. So the Yerushalmi, and there's also many Midrashim say that why do we drink the 4 cups of wine? They correspond to the psukim that say v'itzeisi v'tzalti v'galti v'lakachti. So these psukim, what the psukim are actually telling us is that it's something that's continuously progressive. That first there's v'itzeisi, then v'tzalti v'lakachti v'galti. In other words, there's a process. The one substance that we drink in this world that actually has a progressive process on ourselves as well is wine. In other words, if you drink 1 cup of wine, then you drink another cup of wine, it's compounded. If you drink 1 cup of water, then another cup of water, okay, maybe you'll feel more quenched of your thirst, but it's not compounded. It's not based on how much you drink, that's how much you reach. But wine is progressive. So the idea of the drinking of the wine, the 4 cups of wine, represents that we're moving towards someplace. So on the one hand, you would think that the process of the drinking of the wine starts off from the lowest level, the lowest level. So let's say you'll have 4 cups of wine. So you would say the 4 cups of wine correspond to Asiya, and then Yitzira, then Bria, and then the 4th cup of wine would be Atzilus. Or if you correspond them to the 4 letters in the name of Hashem, you would say it goes from Hey to Vav to Hey to Yud, which means you go from the lower level to the higher level. Or it goes, if you correspond them to the senses, you'll start with a sense of touch. Or if you start, and this is what the Shalom Kaddish writes, if you start with the 4 cups of wine correspond to the Imois, which they do because the cups of wine also correspond to Moichen de Ima, which we'll talk about soon from the Arizal. So because they're connected to the Imois, so the first cup of wine corresponds to Sarah. So you have Sarah, and then Rivka, and then Rachel Leah. So you're going lower, from the lower level to the higher level. Or like the girl would say that you start from Olam Haza to Yemaisa Mashiach, to Olam Haba, to Tchias HaMesim. So they're progressive levels. Yet, in the Torah Sari, which is very clear, which we spoke about a little bit yesterday, it actually works the reverse, which means that it starts off that the 4 cups of wine correspond to the 4 levels of Moichin, the 4 levels of intelligence, and specifically the intelligence of Moichin de Ima, of Bina. And in the Moichin de Bina of the feminine, which is a quality of Ima, the first cup of wine is Chachma of Ima, the 2nd cup is Bina, the 3rd cup is Das Chesed, the 4th cup is Das Givura. So you really start off from the above moving to the below. So in other words, the direction is actually the opposite. You start from the high and you go lower versus when you start lower and you're moving progressively higher. And the truth is they're not really a contradiction, of course. But what we're saying is that the movement higher, which progressively you're getting higher, includes more. So imagine just like an image, let's say something that's thin or slim in the beginning, and then as it's expanding outwards, it's actually including more. So on one hand, it seems like you're going down, but down is actually going up, because when you're going down, you're including more. So what we're saying is that it starts off from a level of chachma, which is the level of still detachment, and then we finally, as we progress the Seder, more becomes involved. So more of our experiences become involved. So not only is our speech, but even our food and everything that we do will become part of the Kedusha, part of the holiness and sacredness of what we're achieving on the Seder night. So it's progressively moving upwards and downwards simultaneously in the same direction. Now, what is basically this idea of drawing down moichin? So if you look in Shar Kavanas, just very quickly, we're going to do this quickly. If you look in Shar Kavanas, which some of you have in Drush Vav, where he talks about the first cup, so the Arizal basically says, Zabir Shaladvar, because Aleph Techaven al Kava Yamin, Shu Moyach HaChachma Shebizah Shemetzad Emo Bilvad. So you should meditate, have intention that you're drawing down the moyach, the intelligence of chachma, in the level of zah that's connected to ima, to bina. Therefore you say kiddush, because kiddush ki call kodesh u'bechinas chachma. Because kodesh is the level of chachma, which means like this. Basically, in very short, to give just a very big overview of what's happening on the Leil HaSeder. So there's Zohar Ampin, which is the place of, let's say, the place of our emotions, the place where we function. And then there's Moichin. There's three levels of Moichin, three levels of Gadlus HaMoichin. So there's Gadlus HaMoichin of Bina, Gadlus HaMoichin of Chachma, and Gadlus HaMoichin of Keser. These are the three levels of Gadlus. What this actually means is very, very practical. So in the Torah Sari, this is talking about on a cosmic level, that when Tiferes, which is Klal Yisrael, also connected to Shem Hashem, is in a state of sleep or there's no moichin, then we're in Gullus. What is Gullus? What is exile? Exile is when we don't have proper das. Everything has to do with our das. Das is basically the conduit that draws down, that connects our higher vision of ourselves, which is connected to our Keser, and our Chachma Bina, which is our understanding of how our life should look. And Das connects that vision, that image of how we are supposed to live our lives and the way we understand we should live our lives with the actuality of our living our life, which is the Zohar Ampin, which is the place of our emotions, and our Malchus, which is the place of our actions. So when a person is in the Ein that when a person is in Galus Adas, which that's what the Zohar calls Galus Mitzrayim, the exile Mitzrayim is Galus Adas. Galus Adas means that our mind is not controlling how we feel and how we act, which means we know something to be true intellectually. We know something to be true on an intuitive level, on a level of Keser, but we don't have the access point or the connection between what we know conceptually in our minds and how we actually feel in our hearts. So therefore, there's a disconnection. So we feel out of sorts, we feel out of place, because we know that in terms of our moichin, this is what we should be doing. This is the vision that we should be achieving in this world. We have the keser, we have the ratzon, the desire of how we should be achieving it. But in actuality, there's a complete misalignment. This is a chesaron in das, because das, the connecting valve, so to speak, between the moichin, between the intelligence and the keser, is not clear. there's a misalignment. This is, and when there's a misalignment, so therefore the child that's born, the emotion that's born, which is us being born, is in a state of exile. There's en kish elo das. If there's no das, it can't be a real healthy child. So when there's a misalignment of das, and das is in exile, this is why Melech Mitzrayim, the Arizal writes, Melech Mitzrayim, with the 4 letters, is 474, which is the word for das, or Eirav is the word for das, because it means that our das was not in a correct state. Moshe Rabbeinu is Bechina of das. So Moshe brings down das, and Moshe brings down a tikkun for Chet Eitzadas. That's why Moshe is born to Yocheved, who's 130 years old in his birth, which corresponds to the 130 years that Adam and Chava were separated from each other, which is the lack of das. They didn't have das. And then Ish Levi Bebeis Levi takes a woman and they have a child, which is creating das, because das is Lashon Yichud. Das is the idea of Yichud. And then the child that's born is the idea of Moshe. And Moshe brings down das to Klal Yisrael. So what is das? Das means that the moichin, the intelligence that we have, the way we understand things to be true, is directly related to how we feel and how we act. So this is basically generally what's going on the Seder night. So we're trying to draw down moichin into our das, so our emotions should be in a proper state, and therefore our actions will be manifested in a correct manner. So in the moichin itself, there's 2 types of moichin. There's moichin that's connected to bina, which is a moichin connected to wine, because wine is a davar hanirgash, is something that tastes good. Like we said, shasam chay lo yatzo yidei cheres. We're not yotzi yidei cheres because we need to taste the wine. The wine has to actually have a pleasant taste in our mouth. We have to feel the taste of the wine. If we shasam b'vas achas, if we just pour the wine down our mouth, we're not yotze. We're not fulfilled the obligation. We have to enjoy the wine, which means it's the enjoyment of understanding that your life actually makes sense. That's moichin de'ima. Moichin de'ima is when you have clarity in your mind and you actually understand, now I understand how things work and I have a geschmack in it, I have relish, and I really get what's supposed to be happening in my life. That's the moichin that we're trying to draw down through the cups of wine. The moichin that's connected to the matzah is bala matzah yotza. If you stuff your mouth with matzah, you're yotza, the mitzvah. In other words, because it's not about really tasting the matzah. It's really just about Luchad and Nusa. It's about bringing down this faith, this type of intelligence, intuitive intelligence that's beyond nirgash, beyond like tasteful. So the basic structure difference between drinking the 4 cups of wine and eating the 3 matzahs will be whether you're drawing down moichin, intelligence that's connected to something that's morgash. And morgash means a certain sensation that it makes sense and it feels right and it's connected and it's clear, and therefore your heart expands and your actions expand. Therefore, everything flows from that place. That's the correct way, and that's the moichin of bina. And then there is the moichin of abba, which is connected more to the eating of the matzah. And God willing, when we get to the achilas matzah, we'll talk about the matzah. Okay, so that's the idea of basically a kaddish, which is that we're drawing down type of moich. Okay. The next thing that we have to do in the Seder night is Urchatz. So why do we do Urchatz? What is Urchatz? So simply, the idea of Urchatz is literally to wash your hands. Now, first of all, what's interesting about the word Urchatz is that the word it's not Urchatz, because every single one of the Simonim is Kadesh, to make Kiddush. It says, okay, make Kiddush. Magid, say Magid. Moitzi is make a Moitzi. So Urchatz should have been Urchatz. Should have been wash your hand, not Urchatz, and wash your hand. So it seems like it's being connected to the previous thing. Kadesh and then Urchatz. So it's a little bit like we spoke before, that specifically on this night, on the Leila Seder, we have to do Kaddish and then wash our hands, not wash our hands first and then do Kaddish. That's the simple pshat. So the Urchatz has to come, like we learned from the Tshuvas Harash, that specifically tonight, we should not do the custom of washing our hands before Kiddush, but we should start off with specifically starting with Kiddush. So then Urchatz. In the Lubavitcher Rebbe's Agada, he has an interesting little note that he says that the word Urchatz starts with a letter Vav because that all the Simonim of the Seder should actually have two syllables. It should have two movements, like Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, Magid. He doesn't say why, but the Pashta is very simply because this is the whole idea of the Seder night. The whole idea of the Seder night is about opposites. First, about the unification of opposites. There's a question, there's an answer. There's bitter and there's sweet. There's a parent and there's a child. Everything moves in both directions. We commemorate slavery and freedom. Everything has its peers. Everything is zivugim. Even the 4 cups of wine is zivugim. The Gemara actually asks this question that it should be like peers. But the idea is that everything has its peer, and the entire structure of the Agada is this dialect between feeling slavery, or feeling enslavement, feeling being part of Egypt, and leaving Egypt, and always contrasting these two, and that movement of back and forth. So that's on one level, that's the idea of Urchatz, which is connected to specifically to this idea of the two sides. Now, why do we wash our hands? Why do we wash our hands? So this is a very big conversation, but I want to start a little bit with the Rambam, and to see what the Rambam writes about this, because the Rambam has a very interesting shitta, and the Rambam's shitta we have to get a little clear, and then we'll go back to why most of Klal Yisrael wash our hands. So if you look at the Rambam, and some of you have actually a Rambam in front of you, you'll see in Perek Ches Halacha Aleph. So in Perek Ches Halacha Aleph of Hilchos Chamas and Matzah, so the Rambam writes, Seder Asiyas Mitzvah Seder B'Leil Chamisha Asa Kachu. The Seder, the order of the way we practice the Seder on this night is as follows. And everyone says Boyer Paragaf, and you say Kiddush Hayom. Then you drink it, v'shoisa. V'achar kach mivorech al netilas yadayim v'noitel yadam. Then you make the blessing al netilas yadayim, and you wash your hands. Okay, so you wash your hands and make netilas yadayim. That doesn't matter. That's already machlekes rishonim. But the idea is that you wash your hands al netilas yadayim. So according to the Rambam, the original idea of washing the hands has nothing to do, apparently, with the eating of Karpas. According to Pehsat, you can say this. In other words, what the Rambam is saying is, you make Kiddush, and you start the meal. How do you start the meal? What's the first thing that you do when you start a meal? You wash your hands and make a bracha. This is what you do. Then, Mavim Shulchan Aruch Ba'alav, Marar, Yorek. Then it says that then you bring the table with the mar and everything that you have, and you bring it in front of you, and then you start the meal. How do you start the Seder night? So Maschil Mavarach Boyer Pri Adama. You begin by making a blessing of Boyer Pri Adama. V'loikeach Yarek, and you take a vegetable. Umetavol Oisa B'charoises, and you dip it into charoises, and you eat a kazayas. And you eat an entire kazayas. Now, what is interesting about this Rambam is many things. First of all, when we wash our hands for Urchatz, we don't say a bracha. We'll see soon why we don't say a bracha, but we do not say a bracha. The Rambam says you do say a bracha. Number 2, you take a vegetable. The Rambam says v'loikeach yarak. You take a vegetable. Doesn't say you take a karpas. And we'll see karpas, according to the way we'll see in the Rishonim, and we'll see later from the Ari, is very specific. It's a type of, it's either a potato or a leek or an onion, but it's a very specific vegetable, not just any vegetable. You can't take a tomato if it's a vegetable. Okay. You take this yarak, and what do? You dip it into charoises. We don't dip our yarak into charoises. We don't dip the karpas in charoises. We dip it into salt water, right? V'oichel, and the Rambam says kazayas, and you eat an entire kazayas. we don't eat a kazayas. We specifically do not eat a kazayas. We eat a smaller measurement than this shear. We eat a very tiny little amount, so we should not make a bracha achrona. Here the Rambam says you make a blessing, you take this vegetable, you put it into the charoisis, and you eat a kazayas. Why does the Rambam hold this shitta? What is the Rambam's opinion? So before we get to the Rambam's opinion, we actually have to understand what is the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch. Why do we do this? What's the purpose of Karpas? So why do we wash our hands? Why do we wash our hands, and why do we eat the Karpas? So why do we wash our hands? So the Gemara says that we're going to eat this yerek, and this is what the Rishonim, Rashi, and the Rashbam, they'll all learn this Gemara this way. It's a Gemara Kuftas Vav. The Gemara basically says that we eat on Pesach night, we eat a vegetable before the meal. Normally, at least in those times, they didn't eat vegetables before the meal. They ate sometimes fruits before the meal, but they didn't eat vegetables before the meal. And vegetables were eaten specifically during the meal or after the meal. So latmiya tinoikis, to arouse suspicion and the question of the child. Specifically, the child should ask the question of manishnan, what's going on tonight? What is different tonight? We do something to arouse the curiosity of a child. That's the reason for the karpas. And let's look what the Shulchan Aruch said. So the Shulchan Aruch says like this. The Shulchan Aruch and Tov Ayin Gimel. So we'll learn in the Torah. He writes, simply, you take this fruit, this vegetable, you dip it in. And why do we do this? This is not something that we do normally. So therefore, the question will be why we dip this. Why we dip it? This is the question. So let's go back to why do we wash our hands? What's the reason for washing the hands? So the simple reason why we're going to wash our hands is because there's a halacha, which the Gemara again in Pesach Kuftas Vav brings down, that kol shetibulu b'mashka sarach netilas yadayim. Anything that is immersed in liquid requires that we wash our hands before we eat it, like what we do with bread. And this is the halacha. This is the way Rashi learns. This is the way the Rambam paskins. This is the way the Shulchan Aruch paskins. Now we have anything that should be b'mashka. The Shulchan Aruch in Kuf Nun Ches rules like this, and this is the Shulchan Aruch rules that anything that's the b'mashka, and the mashkois is any of the 7 types of mashkois, any of the 7 types of liquid, which is wine or honey or oil or milk or any of these things. If you're going to touch it, you have to wash your hands and make a bracha. This is the halacha. Which incidentally, if you eat cereal and milk, maybe you have to make also a bracha. We'll say why you don't have to, but this is the clear halacha. We have to make a bracha. Now, most Jews in the world are not so machper with this halacha, and not so careful with this halacha. For example, if you eat a pickle is something that it's tibula b'mashka. It's a vegetable that's soaked in a juice. Most Jews take a pickle and eat the pickle. What's the heter to eat the pickle without washing your hands? And I'm not saying there's some people that actually do wash their hands, but let's say most people that don't. The heter is 2 things. First of all, Tosfos writes on that Gemara Pesachim, Tosfos shita is that's no longer applicable. Even though the Rashi and the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam rules this way, but the Tosfos shita is that only applies to a time when we used to be careful kachim, and we're tired, we are pure. So therefore, we want to eat our pure food. Today, since most people are not pure anyways, and we live in impure lands, so to speak, so this level of purity doesn't apply anymore. So therefore, that halacha doesn't apply, because that's only so you shouldn't eat. Your hand shouldn't touch the juice shouldn't touch the food doesn't touch the back of your hand, so you're eating something that's tameh. It doesn't matter. So Tosfos says, therefore, we're not nizar on this halacha. This is one reason why the world is more lenient with this halacha, because of the shita of Tosfos. The second reason is because if you eat it with like a fork or something, with a knife or with a chopstick, however you eat. So there's a heter from the Chai Adam, even the Alter Rebbe also seems to say this, that they paskin that if you are not touching the thing itself, and you're not actually holding the thing in itself, then you don't have to make you don't have to wash your hands. In other words, you're using the heter of Tosfos, saying that it doesn't apply anymore, the laws of Tumah. That's one. Or because you're using it through a fork. This is the halacha. Now, comes along Pesach night. And Pesach night, we do something unusual. So Pesach night, we're going to do something shetibula b'mashka. We're going to take this karpas, or we'll see soon it has to be specifically karpas. We're going to dip it into salt water. It becomes tibula b'mashka, like water is one of the seven mashkois. So we're going to dip it into this thing. We are not going to make a bracha because of the machlokes harishonim, whether we should or we shouldn't, and most people pass and we don't, so we're not going to make the bracha al natil sidaim, but we're going to wash our hands. Why are we going to wash our hands? So that in itself is going to be to arouse the suspicion of the child. The child's going to say, all the times of the year you don't do it, so this time of year you do it. Why are you doing it? So the Tmiyat Tinoikis Kadeshi Yishalu, the fact in itself that we wash our hands, we're doing something to arouse the wonderment and the suspicion and the question of the child. This is one reason. So the Netziv writes on this, and Imre Shafir writes that this is really a throwback to the times of the Beis HaMikdash. According to Tosfos, this was only applied in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, when people are pure. So we're trying to recapture this idea and say that in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, when the carbon Pesach was been eaten, if we would do tibul b'mashki, if we would dip something else in water or in one of the liquids, we would have to wash our hands. So we do this also to remind her. So we can say that's even deeper than that. That what we're trying to show is that we're actually living in a higher state of purity. We're demonstrating tonight that saying, even though throughout the year we're not makbeh, we're not careful about this halacha, because we're tameh, tonight we're acting as if we're tar. Tonight we're acting as if we are in the Beis HaMikdash, and we're tar, we're pure, and we're holy, and we're like the Holy of Holies, and we're like the Kohen Gadol, and certainly then, if we would eat Dalash Shetipulu Mashka, we would have to wash our hands. So we're saying tonight we're doing something different. And why? So the child's going to ask, what's tonight different? We're going to say, tonight we're holy. In other words, tonight we are like the Kohen Gadol. Tonight we are derech cheres. And in general, the idea of derech cheres, of acting as if we're free, as freedom, is also connected to washing our hands. Because why a person that is free, or someone that is more affluent, okay, now today people have running water, but the idea of to have fresh water to wash your hands already shows that you're wealthier and that you have the capacity to be clean. To be clean today is a normal thing, but it used to be clean was actually a luxury. Most people couldn't afford to be clean, couldn't afford to clean their clothes as often as possible. So this idea of that we're doing this tonight demonstrates our freedom, demonstrates that we're pure, we're holy, and we're free. So this is why we dip the Karpas. So why are we dipping the Karpas? Again, we're dipping the Karpas, we're washing our hands. We're not making a bracha because of the machlokes harishonim. We dafke eat the Karpas with our hands, right? So not to have the problem with the Chai Adam to say that you don't have to wash your hands if you don't eat with your hands, because you're holding it. So hold dafke the Karpas in your hand, dip it into the salt water, and the child is going to ask, why are you doing this? Why do you wash your hands? Why did you dip it in? And that arouses the wonderment of the child. And the entire idea is, so the child should let me out the tanoikas, the child should be in wonderment and should ask the question. This is the shita, this is the opinion, the way we actually practice this halacha. Okay, before we get to the side, which idea of washing the hand in Karpas, let's go quickly into the Rambam to understand the opinion of the Rambam. So the Rambam's opinion is a little bit puzzling, because the Rambam's opinion is that you take this yerek and this vegetable, and you dip it into charoises. Why charoises? So we that do karpas, and we'll see soon why the idea of karpas. It's there's a lot of side of what the idea of karpas and the numeric value of 360, etc. So we take it and it represents something that's bitter, and you're dipping into bitter water. Okay, so it has to do with katnas. We're going to discuss that soon, but let's just hold that thought for a second. So it has to do something about starting the Seder with a type of katnas now, with a type of constriction to create the arousal of a child, which is a cotton, to ask a question, which is katnas. So that's all about katnas. But according to the Rambam, you take this yarek, you take the vegetable, and you dip it into charoises. Charoises is something sweet. And you eat a kazayas. Why would you eat a kazayas? If the whole idea is just to arouse the suspicion of the child, the wonderment of the child to ask the question, so then specifically don't eat a kazayas. Because you eat a little bit enough, you eat a tiny bit, so the child asks the question. And the child could be you too, but the question is asked. Why would the Rambam hold that you have to eat a full kazayas? Why? It seems like there's a mitzvah of karpas. It's actual mitzvah in itself. So this is a little bit of puzzling Rambam. So the Bach quotes a Maral, which that in itself is nice and interesting. But the Bach quotes a Maral. The Bach in Tafai and Gimel Ches writes like this: that he brings down this Rambam. Before that, I just want to say that he brings down also something beautiful, because he talked about that the idea of dipping in shows, washing our hands, dipping in shows that we're like in the Beis Hamikdash, or we're tahar. And he brings down also that tibul shekoyim asuda derech cheres, also to dip something in before the meal is also derech cheres. This is also a sign of a person that's free or wealthier, that eats all different type of like vegetables, dipped vegetables. Even today you have this, is like to expand the palate, to open up the mouth, to open up the desire for more food. So he says this is a cheres act. Then he brings down the Maral in Gvuras Hashem. And the Maral says like this. The Maral has a different opinion about why we do karpas. He says, "Shel daite atibul arishon huba kedei sheyinika kishoisa atibul sheni shushem mitzvos mara." The Maral writes that really the first dipping of the karpas in salt water, however you dip it, really doesn't arouse any suspicion by the child. Because people do that. You do that once, during a meal. Maybe you take challah, you dip it into a dip. So that's not the wonder. The child is going to ask the question then the second time. He sees that in the beginning of the meal you dipped in the karpas. Then later on in the meal, when it came to Mara, you did the same thing. You dipped Mara into charoises. So he says, so then the question is, if you wouldn't do the first tibul, the first dipping, then the second dipping wouldn't have been noticed. But because you did the first dipping, which is karpas, now you're doing the second dipping, which is the marar, which is for the mitzvah, because that's really the mitzvah, at least midirabanan, that's a real mitzvah to eat marar. Because normally throughout the entire year, people do dip at least once during the meal. But now the child's going to ask on the second dip. The child's going to say, why did you dip again? So where's the child going to ask the question according to the Maral? According to Maral, the question that the child is going to ask is not by the first dip of Karpas, but the child is going to ask the question by Mara. And Chazal Dafka one, Chazal specifically wanted that's where the child should ask the question, because that's where the mitzvah is. When you're going to do the mitzvah, the child's going to ask the question, why are we doing this mitzvah? So you're going to tell them, Mara, because Mara is Chayim, not for Karpas. This is the opinion of the Maral. If we take this opinion of the Maral, which the Bach quotes, this can be now we can understand the Rambam very clear. And this is a chiddush, but this is the way we can read the Rambam. The Rambam tells us that if you want to create the second dip, the second dipping, which is going to be the Mara in Charosis, and you want the child to ask a question, you must do something previously in the Seder in the exact same way. What does it mean to do the exact same way? Take a yerek, take a vegetable, dip it into Charosis, because that's what you're going to do in the Tibul Sheni, by Mara. And how much you're going to eat there? Eat a full kazayas. So then when you're going to do the same thing, the exact same thing the second time, you're going to take a kazayas of Mara and you're going to dip it into Charosis. So the child's going to say, you just did that an hour ago. So if you took less than a kazayas and you dipped it into salt water, the child may say, okay, that was a weird thing that my father did, but it has nothing really to do with the idea of dipping. Maybe some strange behavior that he has. He likes, vegetables and salt. But if you're going to take a full kazayas, which means you're doing a ravachashav, you're doing a full dipping, and you're going to dip it into the exact same element that you're going to dip later the Mara into, because Mara you're going to dip in the Charosis, and Mara you're going to eat a kazayas. So when you do that the first time, what it's going to do is when it comes the second time, when you do the exact same thing, that's when the child is going to ask the question. So that's why the Rambam holds that you actually need a kazayas, and that you need Charosis. Because the Rambam holds that the dipping now is not really the question. That's not really what the child is about to ask. The dipping is for the second time that you're going to dip, it's going to be exactly similar to the first dip. This is what we could say according to the Rambam. However, we don't paskin like the Rambam, and we paskin, Shulchan Aruch doesn't paskin like the Rambam. No one paskins like the Rambam. We paskin that the entire idea of eating the karpas is in itself to arouse the questions of the child. And let's read a little bit from the Kisveri and Shara Kavonis. And here he writes this very clearly. Achar kach inyan karpas. If you have it, it's on page Kuf Samach Zayin, in some of the prints. And it's in Drushvov. It's like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 7th column. Then he says, this is the idea of Karpas. After already that we received the godless, the first godless, the katnas habeis, the godless habeis, the moich chachma demtzad, which is the idea of the drinking of the first cup of wine, which is the idea of the moichen the ema. Then the koisi ayna kiddush keniska hine kvar chitzoinin estalka chizasa. Therefore, there's no longer any chitzoinim, which means we're already induced and propelled to a state of godless. Now, now we can already deal with katnas. In other words, like we said yesterday, if you're going to deal with katnas right away, the problem is that sometimes you're going to be so stuck in the katnas, in the trauma or the issues and the details, that you're never going to get out of the situation. Sometimes you have to be pushed into another reality. You have to kaddish. You have to say, I was here up until this point. Now I'm moving into this direction. I'm kaddish. I'm dedicating. I'm creating the sacred space unrelated to everything in my past. I'm starting from a new beginning. So we start from godless. Once I start from godless, now I can actually go back and talk about my questions, my issues, the bitterness and the suffering and the trauma, everything that's still small. So he says, now we can reclaim the idea of katnas. V'hu milas karpas, v'gimatya shas. Therefore, the word karpas is numeric value of 360, which is Shem Elokim b'milayun. Shem Elokim, the name Elokim, is if you spell Aleph, Lamed, Pei, Lamed, Mem, Daled, Hey, Yud, Yud, Vav, Daled, Mem, Mem, etc., you get the total number of 300. Shehu Shin, Shin, when you fill out the letter Shin, Shin, spelled Shin, Yud, Nun, Yigimatya Karpas. Therefore, the gematria of that word will be Karpas. So we dafke eat Karpas. We dafke eat the idea of Karpas because Karpas is connected to the name of Elohim, which is the idea of constriction and limitations. Now, Karpas is connected to Katnas, and specifically even vegetables. Now, not to talk about vegetables, or fruits, vegetables, but there's an interesting thing when we talk about the Chet Eitz Hadas, that the pasuk in Bereshis, when it talks about the Chet Eitz Hadas, before the Chet, it's called Esav Zereya Zera Shal Pnei Kol Haaretz. It's called Eitz Asher Pri Eitz Zereya Zer Yil Lachem La'achla. Or L'chol Chayes Haaretz, it's called Yerek Esav La'achla. The pasuk seems to say, and this is the way the Ramban reads this verse, this pasuk in Perek Aleph of Test. And if you take a chumash, you can look inside. And the Urachatz HaKadosh fleshes out this idea of the Ramban, that before the Chet, man was meant to live off the fruits, and the animal kingdom, Chayes va'oifes, would eat from the vegetation, from the vegetables. That's why the Gemara says, there's a famous Gemara, this is one of the reasons why we drink wine on Pesach night, is because the Gemara says a different mandamar, different machlekes and Sanhedrin. The Gemara says that there's that the Elon, the tree that Adam and Eve, the Adam and Chava ate from, was either a chita hoya, it could have been a chita, it could be a flower, or it could be a geffen or ta'ena, etc. But chita hoya means that it was flour. Now, flour is not a fruit. It's a priya that they ate from the pri Eitz Hadas. They ate from a fruit. So Chazal tell us that before the Chet, the chita, the flour itself was a fruit, and after the Chet, the flour became a gather of vegetation. And the basic structure between fruits and vegetables. Now, I'm not a farmer, so we're going to have to ask Yoina, other people, to explain us more in detail what this is. But I'll just tell you the very general idea. The way Chazal understand it is that fruit is ripe. You can eat the fruit straight off the tree, which means that it's royal achila. It's right away ready to eat. A vegetable sometimes needs a bigger process in order to get it ready to be, like, for example, a potato. Now, I'm not sure. Maybe people eat raw potatoes, but in general, a potato needs a process. An apple, you take the apple and you eat the apple. The idea of fruit is that it's less labor intensive for us to engage in eating the process. The vegetation represents, the chita represents, or something that's a vegetable represents, where it's more laborious. It takes a little bit more action on our part in order to get this vegetable up to par to be eaten for human consumption. So we're saying like this, that after we make Kiddush, which Kiddush is the idea of starting off at the level of Chacham, we start off the highest Madrega. Now we go back to Katnas, which means we reclaim the child. So even though it's an actual child, but we're also that child that's asking the question. We reclaim the place of question, because Kiddush starts off a place where there's no questions. There's no questions. We start off Kaddish, Evon V'charta, Sorry Menu, Bechir's Klal Yisrael. We start off on a very high level. There's no dichotomies, there's no issues, there's no tensions. We start off straight with Kiddush. Then comes along Karpas. We say now we can reclaim the place of questions. So we eat specifically a vegetable that's grown in the ground, which represents something that's in a very katnus state. And it's katnus in a way that in order for us to actually access it, we have to dig it from under the ground. In order for us to enjoy it, we have to go through a process of cooking it or doing something to it in order for it to become royal achila, and for it to become properly to eat. And it represents the state of Klal of Adam Chava post Chet Eitz Hadas. Because before Chet Eitz Hadas, they were eating just fruit. After Chet Eitz Hadas, then Hashem says, okay, now we can eat everything, because now you have to go through processes. So now there's katnas. So we start koydem achet before the Chet Eitz Hadas. which is a time of, that's called even Gadlus Shlishi. That's the highest level of Gadlus. We start Kaddish, and we start from a place where we're immortal and we're perfect, and there's no place of contention, no place of questions, no place of dissension. We're in a perfect state. We're in a perfect state. That's who we start off on, start the Seder night, the Leil Seder. Then we say, okay, but now that we already claim this truth of who we inherently are, and nothing can shake that reality because that's inherently who we are. We're the Kohen Gadol. We're like kings and queens, like the high priests in the Beis Hamikdash and the Holy of Holies. That's who we are. Now we can say, okay, so but Lepoil, in actuality, we're still living in a place of maybe darkness, and there's still of Hailach, there's still Aram Mitzrayim called the Chfin Yesef Yechol. There's still people that are hungry. The world is not yet perfect. There's still a place of questions, a place of doubt. So now we can descend to that place and re-evaluate that place and slowly work ourselves out of that place, because we know that we already started from a higher place. And that's the way the Seder starts. We start from a place that's koydem achet, before the chet. In a tikkun for the chet Yetzadas, we start as if we're in the Garden of Eden before, and we drink wine, which is a fruit, and which brings joy. And is, like we said, it's compounded. It evolves, and it brings even to higher levels of joy. That's where we start, and then we descend into the place of Urchatz. We wash our hands to arouse suspicion of the child. That the questions have to be asked. Children have to ask questions. We eat the vegetable, the lowly vegetable, connected to the earth, connected to processes. And now we're going to start to slowly build vessels of katnus that we can reach a higher level of godless as we're progressing through the same. So this is be'erach what happens after Kaddish. So we have Kaddish, Urchatz, and now Karpas. And this for Karpas is also the word of Samach Perach. This is brought down in the Rishonim. The Maril brings it down. The 60 that were harsh labor, Mariris. This is all Mariris we're going to talk about is the bitterness of the body. So the Mar is going to be more existential beer. Mar is connected to Mavis and death and mortality. But the beer first is the Koyat Gufni, the physical labor, the physical fact that we're still in a body and our body hurts and aches, and we have limitations of the body. That's the idea of Karpas. So we're slowly moving into that space so we can move towards a higher place.